Iran Daily Briefing, Friday, May 1st, 2026. Iran's supreme leader declared Thursday that the United States has been defeated. At the same moment, President Trump signaled that strikes could resume. Those two statements, made on the same day, capture the central tension in today's reporting, and oil markets reacted to both. France 24 reported Brent. Crude briefly surpassed $126 per barrel on Thursday. We'll explain what's driving that and what it means for Americans at the pump. Today's reporting contains competing signals, indications the active fighting phase may be winding down, alongside signals from the president that strikes could resume. Here's what we'll cover. The top story: Iran's supreme leader's declaration of U.S. defeat set against Trump's threat of renewed military action, and what a senior official's legal claim about the war powers resolution tells us about Washington's internal posture. Then, three stories we're retiring from active coverage: Toronto, the nuclear access dispute, and Bahrain, plus new oil price data that came in Thursday and constitutes a genuine development beyond what we reported yesterday. And we'll close with what to watch over the next 24 to 48 hours. The headline from Tehran on Thursday: Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei declared that the United States had suffered, in his words, a shameful defeat. A note on sourcing here. France 24 reported this statement, and our confidence on all items relating to Khamenei's role and statements sits in the moderate range. We covered his appointment in a prior episode. Listeners who want to revisit that should check our April 26 episode, though we'd note that the date reference is drawn from our prior coverage rather than today's sourced items. What today's France 24? RIA reporting confirms is the statement itself. A written message, read on Iranian state television, timed to mark Iran's annual Persian Gulf Day celebration. The message was political as much as ceremonial, framing the conflict as a U.S. defeat on a nationally symbolic occasion broadcast on state television is a clear signal about how Tehran wants its domestic audience to read the current situation. From Washington, the signals pointed in a different direction. President Trump stated Thursday that the U.S. is blockading the Strait of Hormuz and suggested the war may resume. Iran's president called the U.S. siege, in his words, intolerable. That is not a negotiating posture. That is a public statement of strain. Now, here is where the legal picture becomes relevant. Al-Monitor reported on April 30th that a senior Trump administration official stated that U.S. hostilities with Iran, which began in February, per that same official, have now terminated for purposes of the War Powers Resolution. The War Powers Resolution is the U.S. law that governs how long a president can conduct military operations without congressional authorization. To say hostilities have terminated under that law is a specific legal claim with specific consequences for what the administration is required to report to Congress. That claim needs to be handled carefully. It comes from a single anonymous official, reported by Al-Monitor alone, and our confidence on it is below the threshold we treat as firmly established. So, one anonymous official, one outlet per Al-Monitor. What makes it significant is the context. The same official said there has been no exchange of fire between U.S. forces and Iran since Tuesday, April 7th, which aligns with the ceasefire that has been in place since April 7th to 8, now more than 3 weeks old. The ceasefire itself was originally agreed as a 2-week arrangement, according to Al-Monitor and Middle East Eye, and has since been extended. So the legal claim appears to rest on a real operational fact. The guns have been quiet since early April, but legally terminated and currently paused are not the same thing. And Trump's public statements Thursday, signaling strikes could resume, sit uneasily alongside an official claim that hostilities have ended. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth testified before a Senate committee Thursday alongside a top general, the first public congressional hearing since the conflict began. Al Jazeera reported it. We have no readout of what was said, but the timing matters. The administration appears to be simultaneously telling Congress hostilities are over, while telling the public that renewed action remains on the table. Watch for any congressional response to the war powers claim, and for whether the Hegseth testimony produces an attributed statement about the administration's legal or military posture. Story 1. Oil prices. Thursday's data. Thursday's data shows the clearest market signal in weeks. France 24 reported oil prices briefly surpassed $126 per barrel on Thursday, driven by reports of potential new U.S. strikes against Iran. France 24 also reported that Brent crude reached its highest level since March 2022. The trigger was the same Trump signal we covered in the top story. Markets read the possibility of resumed strikes as a supply disruption risk, and prices moved accordingly. At the pump, Al Jazeera reported that U.S. gas prices reached $4.30 per gallon as of Thursday, a jump of nearly 30 cents in 1 week. That is a figure Americans are feeling directly. Trump stated Thursday that gas prices will drop after the Iran conflict concludes. That is a political promise tied to a military and diplomatic outcome that remains unresolved. Watch for whether oil prices stabilize or continue rising into the weekend, and whether the White House or Treasury make any statement on the pump price increase. Story 2. The Senate hearing. Thursday's congressional hearing on the Iran war was, according to Al Jazeera, the first public hearing since the conflict began, now on its 63rd day. Defense Secretary Hegseth and a senior general appeared before the committee. We have no sourced readout of the testimony, but the hearing itself is significant as a structural fact. Congress is, for the first time publicly, asking the administration to account for the war. That matters more if the war powers claim we covered in the top story becomes a formal submission to Congress. Watch for any attributed reporting on what Hegseth said, and for any congressional pushback on the legal terminated claim. Story 3. Retiring 3 tracked stories. 3 stories we have been tracking are being retired today. Toronto. We have no new source development on the Iran delegation's treatment at Toronto Airport. Canada has not issued a public response. Iran's formal diplomatic response remains unclear, and a specific detail from our prior coverage, the reported identity of the delegation leader, remains unconfirmed. We will stop tracking this story absent new developments. Nuclear access. No new source development today. We are retiring this thread pending new intel. Bahrain. No new source development today. We are retiring this thread as well. We opened this episode with a question embedded in the day's competing signals: the supreme leader declaring victory, the president threatening resumed strikes, and oil markets reacting to both. Here is the fuller picture. France 24 reported that Khamenei's statement came in a written message read on state television during Iran's Persian Gulf Day, a national occasion. The statement declared the U.S. had suffered a shameful defeat. That same day, Trump publicly signaled strikes could resume, and Iran's president called the siege intolerable. On oil, France 24 reported the $126 per barrel figure as a Thursday market spike driven specifically by strike reports. Brent crude hit its highest point since March 2022. At the pump, Al Jazeera reported $4.30 per gallon, up nearly 30 cents in a week. And on the legal question, a single senior anonymous official told Al Monitor on April the 30th that hostilities have formally terminated under the War Powers Resolution, citing no exchange of fire since April 7th. That claim from one official at one outlet has not been confirmed by additional sources. 3 things to watch in the next 24 to 48 hours. 1. The War Powers claim. Al Monitor reported a senior official's assertion that hostilities have legally terminated. Watch for any formal submission to Congress, any congressional response, or any additional sourcing that either confirms or contradicts this claim. 2. The Hegseth testimony readout. Thursday's Senate hearing was the first public congressional hearing on the Iran war. No attributed account of the testimony has emerged. Watch for reporting on what was said. 3. Oil prices into the weekend. Thursday's data showed a spike to $126 per barrel and $4.30 at the pump, per France 24 and Al Jazeera. Watch for whether those levels hold, rise, or pull back as markets digest the competing signals from Washington and Tehran. Today's episode covered Iran's supreme leader declaring U.S. defeat on the same day Trump signaled strikes could resume. Thursday's oil price spiked to $126 per barrel, as reported by France 24. The first congressional hearing on the Iran war and the retirement of 3 tracked stories: Toronto, nuclear access, and Bahrain, while noting that the delegation leader's identity and Iran's formal diplomatic response from the Toronto incident remain unconfirmed. The legal claim that hostilities have terminated under the War Powers Resolution per a single anonymous official per Al Monitor remains a single-source item to watch. We'll be back Monday with the next briefing. If you found today's briefing valuable, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes every morning.